Happy lunch hour, gang. All right, to all those people who think, nah, this ain't happening, bunch of conspiracy theorist talk, it's a bunch of people just freaking out over stuff, there's no real semblance to this, Joe's only going to recommend the new election injection, oh, those hospitals are just erring on the side of caution. Those schools are closing for other reasons. Right. Okay. All that stuff that we've talked about since summer, saying, guess what's coming this fall? Guess what? Every day we get more and more evidence that this is coming. I want you to take a look at this clip that was filmed this morning in New York City. Now, specifically, I want you to look at the scrolling bar there on the squad car and read what that says. That's what the cops are driving around New York advertising to the public. Not photoshopped. That is not some meme. That is actually what is on the back of squad cars in New York City today. Okay? Yeah. Start social distancing, folks, because 6 feet works, just like last time. Make sure you put on the masks, because that works just like last time, right? Okay. If you want to put on a mask that is actually going to work, you need to get yourself an NBC mask, a full face covering, head covering mask that covers your eyes, that covers your nose, that covers your mouth, that will filter out practically anything. Okay? Just saying. Now, this part kind of slipped under the radar. And this is where I say, mark your calendars. I just found out about this morning because this was so well advertised that none of us know about it. On August 3rd, so what is that, 3.5 weeks ago, FEMA announced they are going to do a test of the emergency alert system. Okay? Now, I'm just saying, this is the 7th time, or this will be the 7th time that they have tested the emergency alert system since 2011. Okay? It is going to be a test that is going to be broadcast. It's supposed to start at like 2:20 or 2:30 in the afternoon Eastern, and it will be across the entire country. So if you're in Central Time Zone, it's 1:20. You're in Mountain Time Zone, 12:20. You're out west, it's 11:20, going on back. All right. It will be broadcast to every internet-connected device, so your tablet, your cell phone, whatever will get it. It will go out over all the radio stations, all the TV stations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what they're saying now is this will be a test. I wouldn't bet the farm on it, but I'll bet that was the precursor to that's the day we're going to probably hear something about stay in your house, don't go anywhere, blah, 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 blah. Okay? The funny part about that is, go back to Maui here. Remember how well those sirens worked in Lahaina? Oh, that's right. They didn't set them off. They didn't warn anybody. We can do a test, but when there's actually something that's an emergency, we're not going to bother. But if we stick in Hawaii, we can go back to a few years ago when they did set off the emergency alert system, telling everybody that there was a ballistic missile heading toward Hawaii. Oops, that was a mistake. Yeah, Hawaii, your track record ain't exactly what I'd call good. The time there is an emergency, you don't broadcast it. The time there isn't an emergency, you did. Okay? This is the thing, guys. Maybe it's just a test. Hopefully, it's just a test. Probably, it's just a test. But anything that comes out anymore, I look at very skeptically. That, FEMA announced this, and nobody knew about it. It wasn't mentioned on the mainstream media. It wasn't mentioned on cable news. It wasn't anywhere on the internet. I found it today on a teeny tiny little website that, of course, got me to go look at the FEMA site. And, of course, there I found it on the FEMA site, dated August 3rd, that they are going to do a test. And I'll link it below so you can read it, exactly what it is. Is it really a test? Maybe. I'm going to be skeptical. I'm going to prepare as though that is D-Day. That is the day where the Biden administration says, today's the day we're going to complete our job. Remember, his campaign slogan is 4 more years to finish the job. Okay, we're doing good, if you're Joe Biden, at destroying the country so far. Could October 4th be the day that, hey, we're shutting it all down, everybody stay home, nobody go to work, stores all close, unless, of course, you're a big box store or a Democrat Party donor, you can stay open. Okay. Oh, gee, we need to put up the plexiglass again. Oh, gee, we need to start enforcing all the mandates again. Oh, gee, this is the day that we're going to announce that the election injection is mandatory. Okay? Right. It's funny how this is all coming out. Think about this. And they've slipped a couple of times. When you listen to some of these comments that are made out of Biden, out of Harris, out of Pelosi, out of Schumer, out of a lot of the other Democrat parrots saying, we have an election in November. We have an election next November. The election isn't in 3 months. The election is in 16, okay, or 15 months here, if you will. Math, yeah. Why are they jumping out so far? This is a question that comes up all the time. We've heard the stories now about you're going to be prohibited from going into any federal building unless you have a face diaper on, right? Okay. The comment has come up many times about you're not going to be allowed to vote unless you have a face covering on, unless you've taken the election injection, whatever, right? Okay. And everybody goes, why are they doing this a year ahead of time? Maybe if it was August 2024 and we were 3 months away from the presidential election, maybe then it would make sense to see how they're trying to force all this stuff. Stop and think for a second. What starts in January? Primary season. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. You haven't had your 87th booster? You're not allowed to vote in the primaries. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The primaries are held in this public building. You're not allowed to come in to vote in the primaries. Okay? Think about this. Election season starts in about 4 months. If we set off an emergency alert in October, then you have less than 3 months till you get into election season, and pretty damn close, just slightly over 3 months till the first polls open, okay, in the primary season. Do they do mail-in balloting for primaries? No. Let's look at Iowa. Iowa does caucuses, okay? And if you don't know the difference between caucuses and primaries, caucuses are where you have to be there physically. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, you're not allowed to participate in the caucuses because you haven't followed all the guidelines set forth by Joe's administration. You start looking at everything they're doing and start thinking a little bit ahead. Now, I know a bunch of you are going to say we're never going to have elections in 2024. You may be right, okay? If you use Ukraine as a perfect example, okay? You know, this is classic, of course. You know, I love how they try to say Ukraine is a democracy. It's not, okay? But in that respect, the United States isn't a democracy either, guys, okay? You know, Canada's a democracy. The United States is a constitutional republic. Just make that clear. But Vladimir Zelensky, Volodymyr, I guess, okay, came out today and said they're not going to hold elections in early 2024. They're supposed to be in October, okay? The current martial law doesn't expire till November, okay? And they've got to renew the martial law every 90 days. Get this. Zelensky said he's not going to hold elections in early 2024 unless the US and the UK pay for them. Your tax dollars. Now, let's see how Joe handles that one. Okay? Are we going to send more money because Joe wants free and fair elections in Ukraine? Does Joe want free and fair elections in the United States? Okay. It's going to be very interesting if he comes out and says that's what he wants in a foreign country, but keeps doing all this here. Interesting, right? So that leads to the next setup. How is Zelensky postponing all these elections? Martial law. What better way to postpone our elections than for Joe to declare the same thing? We haven't hit 100% compliance yet. Therefore, we need martial law. Could that be what's coming on October 4th? They're not going to, understand this. They're not going to tell you on August 3rd that we're going to declare martial law on October 4th. I'm not saying that's what they're going to do. Okay. I'm just making you think about the possibilities. This is it. Again, what you prep for is for any future possibility, correct? You're not prepping because you know something's going to happen. You prep because something might happen. Call me a conspiracy theorist, call you whatever you want. But this administration's track record of being honest with us ain't exactly stellar. You know, take a look at what's going to be done. And again, I go back to what I said yesterday, and I thank Travis over at Prepared Homestead. I thank Prep Rebel. I thank Steve Poplar for affirming what I was telling you guys yesterday. And there may be others that I'm just not aware of. But if you haven't checked out of any of their channels, I would highly recommend it. But you need to get yourself ready. Again, as I've said many times, to not be able to leave your property, or at least in the immediate nearby, depending on where you are. You know, where I am, okay, if the National Guard was called out and we were in martial law, they're not going to be standing on my street, okay? You know, all of the 20 people that live within a mile of me, they're not going to send somebody out there to stop. They may be at the beginning of town, okay, but that's it. But if you live in a apartment complex in the city, if you live in the suburbs or whatever it is, think about where those major places are. Go back a couple of years ago to when we were all locked down and how easy it was to drive anywhere because there was no traffic on the road. Because everybody was staying home, they were afraid of everything. Now, if the only people out on the road are the guy with the blue helmet on, They're slowly setting this up, guys. Frog in the pot, as you guys mentioned many times. The water is slowly being turned up and slowly being turned up. You look at what was on the back of a NYPD squad car today. You look at what Joe said over the weekend. You look at what I found out here about FEMA. Start putting the puzzle pieces together.